One more story on the enraging and absurd stance by many within the Republican Party on gun control. This is coming in the wake, this discussion once again, of the Nashville, Tennessee shooting. I know we've discussed this a lot on today's show, but I want to continue with this a little bit more. Here, Jared Moskowitz, Democratic representative, gets into a back and forth with Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. And there's actually something super important to discuss, a general thing we see a lot in American politics with the modern right wing. After you take a look at this clip, and Jared Moskowitz makes a correct point, but a devastating point.
Is there any question? I'll yield to anyone on this committee who disagrees that murder in schools is not murder. I yield.
Will you yield?
Oh, I'll yield. Yes, please.
Yeah, when I was in 11th grade and Joe Biden made our schools gun-free school zones, one of the students in my school brought 3 guns to school, and our entire school went on lockdown because he was the only person with a gun. There was no good guy with a gun to protect us kids at school. You want to know why the shooter is dead in Nashville, the trans shooter? You want to know why? Because a good guy with a gun killed that woman. She identified as a man. She was mentally ill, probably taking hormones, and she went in and murdered children and adults in this Christian school in Nashville. So if you want to have a good talk about schools and protecting children, we need to talk about protecting our children the same way we protect our president, we protect our celebrities, we protect this building.
My time.
Okay, I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, there are 6 people that are dead in that school, including 3 children, because you guys got rid of the assault weapons ban. Because you guys made it easy for people who don't deserve to have weapons, who are mentally incapable of having weapons of war, being able to buy those weapons and go into schools. I voted for SROs in my schools in Florida after Parkland. We have SROs on every school. Did the good guys with the guns stop 6 people from getting murdered? No. But you know what? AR-15s, you know seen what those bullets do to children? You know why you don't hunt with an AR-15 with a deer? Because there's nothing left. And there's nothing left of these kids when people go into school and murder them while they're trying to read. You guys are worried about banning books. Dead kids can't read.
That's correct. And again, I say, as I did in a previous segment today, if you're going to say that the banning books is because you want to protect the kids, or the unbelievable and absurd hateful obsession with drag queens, or the demonizing of LGBTQ people, or the banning of CRT that isn't taught in elementary schools is because you want to protect the kids, but you won't act to address the leading cause of death for children, you have absolutely no place in this conversation. If you don't want to solve problems in your position of power in Congress, Marjorie Greene, or Tim Burchett, who we covered on the last show talking about, we're not going to fix it. Congress doesn't have a role in addressing gun violence.
I don't see any real role that we could do other than mess things up, honestly. And we're not going to fix it. Criminals are going to be criminals.
Then get out of Congress. That's your job. If you're not interested in solving the issues that people are facing, get out of Congress. But the broader phenomenon going on here that I want to discuss is the hyper-individualization from many within the right wing on different areas that we're discussing within politics. And that's how they have talking points that thrive within a certain population. So with mass shootings, with gun violence, it's often, well, in this particular case, if we talk about this particular thing, then we don't have to talk about gun control. Here, it's Marjorie Greene saying it's because the shooter was transgender. That's what she believes the focus should be, so that we aren't talking about the broader data, the broader facts of the situation. The understanding that if we didn't have so many guns on the streets and so many unregulated guns within our the market, then we would see gun violence decreased. That has to be distracted from by many. And so instead it's, no, this door wasn't locked, or it was locked, but they were able to shoot through it, or if we had 10 guards on campus, then maybe to distract from what is a very real solution we could be implementing. And it's not that I don't want a security guard on campus, sure, or I don't think the doors should be locked. I think they should. But that's how these narratives thrive. It's, let's dive into the uber nitty gritty of one instance and say, well, actually, this particular law wouldn't have prevented this particular action, so that we're not talking about, as a general rule, we do see that gun regulation decreases gun violence, common sense gun laws. That does make people more safe. And we see this in other areas too. When it comes to poverty, it'll be, let's talk about, obsess over the one hypothetical or even real example of someone abusing the welfare system, for example. And that should be the focus of all of our conversations. Instead of understanding that how we lift people out of poverty is properly invest in programs that are aimed to do that, and attempting to properly and reasonably, but much more significantly, invest in communities to make people more able to get out of poverty. And that makes all communities better. That uplifts everyone when people are able to then participate more in their community and patronize businesses more because they're not in such a brutal financial situation, and possibly start their own business and all of that. And we know that those types of investments make a difference and make the entire country better off and more productive and all of that. But if you keep the conversation about this one hyper individualized instance that they talk a lot about, oh, but don't you like don't you hate the idea of someone who doesn't have to work because they're just taking advantage of all these welfare programs? And then that becomes the whole talking point, and that's why we need to make sure these programs don't exist. And so many different areas as well. Even just the whole, oh, you should be thinking all the time about how terrible it would be if your kid was being taught this thing that they're not being taught, but I can find one video of a teacher saying one thing that's slightly off, and then an entire effort is mobilized because of that to prevent just good conversations from being had. And the broader effect of banning all these things and making all these changes to our educational system to prevent kids from hearing certain things, the broader effect is horrible. But on an individual level, people can really obsess and get motivated over whether it be an out of context or even overblown situation, or just made up situations that are very individual and not zoomed out. How is this societally a problem? Is it a problem societally? And how societally do we make a change on this front if it is? And that is definitely what is done with shootings, so they don't have to discuss. Put simply, one of the major solutions to gun violence is gun control. We know that if we zoom out. Now, one in particular, maybe it still would have happened, but zoomed out, that would be the effect. And that's the conversation Marjorie Greene doesn't want to have.